Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right in and unpack everything about the foundation of Vietnam, literally tracing its roots from ancient migrations all the way to the absolute economic miracle we see today. It's an incredible story of a people who've continuously faced just overwhelming odds, yet somehow always found a way to reinvent themselves.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. Ancient roots and early resistance, 2. The Great Dynastic Era, 3. French colonialism and rebellion, 4. Decades of war and partition, and finally 5. Doi Moi, the economic miracle. Section 1. Ancient roots and early resistance.
Going way back, roughly 4,000 years, we see these early Neolithic Austroasiatic migrations that brought absolutely crucial rice farming knowledge to the region. And tradition tells us the legendary Hongbong dynasty formed the very first Vietnamese state around 2879 BCE. But, their independence was challenged early on. Fast forward to 1101 BCE, and the Chinese Han Empire conquers the region, kicking off a 1,000-year period of Chinese domination. But here's the thing, it was anything but peaceful for the conquerors. The era was punctuated by fierce, continuous uprisings, and the most famous of these? That happened in 40 AD, led by the legendary Trung sisters.
The Trung sisters actually became queens for a short time after their rebellion, which just perfectly highlights the absolutely crucial role of women in early Vietnamese history. Another fierce symbol of resistance was Lady Trio in the 3rd century. She famously declared, "I want to ride the storm and sweep away the enemies." And honestly, that untamed rebellious spirit, it became permanently woven into the national identity. Section 2. The Great Dynastic Era. So think of these major dynasties as the architects who systematically built a centralized Vietnamese identity, all while steadily expanding their territory. After Ngo Quyen finally threw off Chinese rule in 939 AD, the Dinh dynasty unified the state shortly after. Then the Li and Tran dynasties stepped up and accomplished the seemingly impossible. They successfully repelled massive Mongol invasions. No small feat, right? Later on, in 1428, Lê Loi founded the Li dynasty by defeating a brutal Ming occupation, and he went on to deeply embed Confucian governance into the state apparatus. Finally, we reach the Nguyen dynasty, which in 1802 officially unified the modern borders of Vietnam after centuries of civil war and division. Through all of this, the Vietnamese were steadily pushing southward, eventually absorbing the ancient Champa kingdoms.
But it wasn't just about the battlefield. Women played profound, foundational roles during these dynastic times as scholars, leaders, and the keepers of family culture. Take the 11th century, for example. Queen Mother Elan practically guided the entire nation while the king was away. She was opening schools and actively supporting the vital agricultural sector. And then you have the amazing story of Nguyen Thi Duệ. She was this brilliant scholar who actually disguised herself as a man just so she could take the imperial exams. She eventually served directly in the royal court. They were quite literally breaking barriers long before the modern era.
Section 3. French colonialism and rebellion. Now, let's look at the stark contrast between traditional Vietnamese life and the colonial era. Pre-colonial Vietnam was a place where over 90% of the population lived in these highly autonomous agricultural villages, working in rhythm with the monsoon seasons. Well, the French radically altered that reality. They used a divide-and-rule tactic, splitting Vietnam into 3 separate regions to fracture national unity. Down in the south, they created the colony of Cochinchina, transforming it into an exploitative, semi-feudal production zone. The administration seized land for mass rice exports back to Europe. And the tragic irony? This created widespread malnutrition and poverty among the very local farmers who were actually growing the food. Despite that widespread malnutrition and severe repression, the ancient tradition of repelling invaders continued. The Vietnamese people flat out refused to accept the treaties that signed their sovereignty away. Guerrilla resistance sparked almost immediately. And once again, women were at the absolute forefront. Leaders like Nguyen Thi Minh Khai became enduring symbols of sacrifice. And consider young heroines like Vo Thi Sao, who joined the resistance at just 14 years old and was later executed by the colonial regime at 19. She proved that the unbreakable spirit of Lady Tri from centuries ago was still very much alive.
Section 4. Decades of war and partition.
Think about that fraction 1/10. It's staggering. In the 1954 Battle of Dien Bien Phu, the Viet Minh forces pulled off a stunning display of strategic brilliance and sheer endurance. They completely overran a heavily fortified French camp that was supposed to be literally impenetrable. In that single garrison defeat, the French Union shockingly lost 1/10 of its total Indochina manpower.
It was the decisive blow that effectively ended the First Indochina War. And this profound psychological victory, it didn't just end French rule in Vietnam. It sent a massive ripple of hope through colonized nations globally, from Africa all the way across Asia. As the Algerian leader Farhad Abbas so powerfully stated, this was the affirmation of colonized peoples everywhere. It completely destroyed the myth of European invincibility and catalyzed anti-colonial movements across the globe.
But of course, the victory at Dien Bien Phu did not bring immediate peace. The 1954 Geneva Accords temporarily divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel, and almost immediately, the country was swept up into the global Cold War. The resulting Vietnam War was absolutely devastating, fought between a North supported by the Soviet Union and China, and a South aided by the United States. It raged for 2 brutal decades until the fall of the South in 1975. Finally, in 1976, the nation was reunified into the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. The country was whole again, but the human and economic costs were simply staggering.
Section 5. Doi Moi, the economic miracle. 700%. By the mid-1980s, Vietnam was in dire straits. You had a highly centralized, planned command economy, mixed with severe agricultural shortages, a U.S. embargo, and deep international isolation following the occupation of Cambodia. It pushed the country to the absolute brink, suffering a crippling inflation rate of over 700%. The nation was quite literally starving, and with Soviet aid rapidly declining, it was obvious that something drastic had to change.
And that drastic change was Doi Moi, or renovation. Initiated in December 1986 by leaders like Nguyen Van Linh, these reforms brilliantly transitioned the country's trajectory. The government dismantled the central management subsidy system. They decentralized farming so farmers could actually keep production beyond their quotas, encouraged private businesses, and opened the doors to foreign trade. Now, it's really important to note here, while they fundamentally altered the economy toward a socialist-oriented market system, they specifically retained their political structure.
The results of Doi Moi were immediate and honestly explosive. Look at this staggering jump in GDP, going from $6.4 billion in 1990 to $31.1 billion by the year 2000. In just one single decade, the economic reforms completely unleashed the pent-up entrepreneurial energy of the Vietnamese people. By removing price controls and opening up trade, the economy didn't just walk forward, it sprinted.
So, what did this mean for the people? That ancient resilience translated into extraordinary economic adaptation. Within a single generation, Vietnam went from being one of the poorest nations on Earth to a thriving middle-income economy. By opening up, they attracted over $18.3 billion in foreign direct investment during this era, which led to a massive, statistically significant reduction in national poverty. It was an overhaul so incredibly successful that the World Bank officially dubbed Vietnam a development success story. As we wrap up this explainer, we can clearly see that Vietnam's modern economic miracle is really just the newest chapter in a 4,000-year-old story of an unbreakable, ever-adapting culture. From ancient queens fighting empires to modern citizens building a global market powerhouse, the foundation of Vietnam is built on pure resilience. Having survived millennia of conflict, partition, and crisis, how will this ancient instinct for renovation shape Vietnam's role on the world stage in the 21st century? It's a truly fascinating question, and one we will all get to watch unfold. Thanks for learning with us today.